Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. I want to help you out if you're a parent that's dealing with a child who has ADHD, or maybe you suspect that your child may have it, or maybe you know somebody who is. We've got important information, important insight, and she is an ADHD, ADD advocate, and she's back with us. And so great to have her on. I've learned so much helping others through her. Karen Lowry is on the program. Hey, Karen, how you doing?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, it's good to have you back here, even though, I mean, I know you're in transition, you're in your car right now and doing your thing, but that's because you're the person in demand right now, because so many kids are being diagnosed with ADHD. Lots of parents don't know how to navigate it. What do you find right now? Like what in your mind, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to children with ADHD, the school interaction, the parents, that whole relationship right there?
Well, I speak from not only an advocate and a coach, but I also speak as a parent. And I know that behavior is a huge part of a lot of the struggles that we as parents have with ADHD, and also the struggles we have with the school. Because if you have a child with the combined, in particular, which is what I have, impulsive, hyperactive, and inattentive, a child like this who doesn't have the inattentive only type of ADHD has a lot of trouble in the classroom behaving and sitting still and focusing, all the expectations that you have for a child in a classroom. And unfortunately, I think so many people don't understand ADHD, and they look at that central symptom of behavior, which many of our kids have, and they say, it seems, and they think of it as a neurotypical kind of situation where they say, I mean, if you have a behavior, you should be able to control it. So if you're not controlling it, you're a bad kid. And I'm not saying that they necessarily say that directly to that child, but this is something that they feel and they believe because they don't understand what is happening with this child and why is this behavior happening. So that's one of my biggest focal points about kids with ADHD and trying to be successful in school is if your child has behavioral issues that are occurring, they need to be taken care of. And the school, again, has a responsibility to look at that and make something happen.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't. And I'll give you an example. And this is even based on something that we talked about a few weeks ago. You had mentioned, and it was a psychoeducation evaluation, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I know somebody going through a challenge, not definitely ADHD, but not prescribed or not diagnosed, but some challenges there. So they asked the school for that evaluation. There was a meeting. Now, this is a teen who is vaping, admits it, THC, and the school told the parents that because of the drug use that they can't get an accurate evaluation and they're not going to do it. And it was game over. And that was the end of it. And the parents needed to agree to that. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think the IDEA, that is the governmental statute around special education, talks about mitigating factors. And in this case, maybe this is what would fall under that regarding if you have a child who is on, let's say, a medication for ADHD. This is not something that someone can say, well, since you're on medication and you're focused better, we're going to move on because now you're fine. It can never, ever be that. It cannot be a mitigating factor that takes away all of the struggles of that disability. So I would say that's a real problem to say no, and I don't think they can do that. That would be my initial thoughts. Now, it's a vaping, it's not an ADHD medication per se.
Right.
I don't know that, I guess my question would be, why can't he stop vaping and be evaluated? I don't know why that has to come into play as well. But I can tell you, just based on our conversations about any mitigating factors should not be in the way of parents getting support for their child.
Well, his vaping, as I understand it, teens are addicted. It's going on now. It's rampant in even middle schools, certainly high schools. And you can do whatever you want to take it away. They're going to find it. They're going to,
Yeah.
go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. And, hit a vape pen a friend has, and then be back in class. So, that's challenging there. But, in this situation, there's two different things. Yeah. We have the addiction issue, but then we have the either behavioral or learning challenge. But the school basically told the parents, yeah, that's it. I don't know if it was a done deal or that's their feeling, and then they want the parents to say, all right, well, I'm just going to, take the evaluation off the table. You're right. I mean, I'm sure if the parents maybe pushed it more, that could have been done.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and again, we do have that thought, how much is the substance use affecting their schoolwork or their concentration? Don't know. Really don't know.
Well, and a lot of kids with ADHD self-medicate. They know they're struggling, and they take things to help them focus, or
right.
they take things for anxiety, all those comorbid
Coping.
conditions.
Yeah, to cope.
Yeah. So, I mean, this kid sounds like he absolutely does need an evaluation, and does need support, because that probably is the reason why he is vaping to begin with. And so also, I'd like to talk to the parents too about something else pretty important. And I think again, along the lines of behavior, if you have a child with behavioral issues and no one in the school is really dealing with it, and I know many parents get phone calls from schools and they say, you need to come pick your kid up.
Right.
He's throwing this, he's doing that. So remember that when you do that, your child is not being provided FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education. They are due this by law. You interrupt their school day and you tell a parent to come and get your kid, and you haven't done anything to help with the behavior that is related to the disability, you are breaking special ed law, and that should not be happening. Parents should not be having to come and get their kid at all. So I think, my suggestion would be, along with gathering data and putting it in writing, you can ask for an FBA, a functional behavioral assessment. And in doing that, and that's by either an outside source, if the school doesn't have a psychologist in-house, or psychologists do them. And it's a great way of making assessments in different environments of the school. And the point of it is to see what are the triggers that are occurring to create this behavior. It is a way to come up with a really good behavior plan. Without that, I don't think a behavior plan can really happen. You really need to have a good FBA. And I was just recently talking to a client, and that was an issue. They haven't done an FBA in a very long time. And the child is having more behavior issues in school. After much advocating on her part, they come up with a behavior plan that's awful, because sadly, it is not individualized to that child. It's only pointing out, if this happens, if that happens, if that happens. That is not a behavior plan. Behavior plan has to be individual to that child. And how are you going to get it individual unless you have data around what is triggering the behavior and what can we do to mitigate that behavior?
What if it's not so much behavioral issues, but it's more learning issues, or not wanting to go to school? And maybe there's self-esteem issues. I'm not doing well in school. I don't want to be there.
Exactly.
That can come into play. But just what you said before, where you get the phone call, come and get your kid. Kids are so crafty now, and if they don't want to be in school, they will find ways. Because let's face it, I'm sick, I feel like I'm going to throw up, I have to go to the nurse. School can't say anything. You have to get your kid's in the nurse's office, and then there you go. Big challenge. Being a parent is is very challenging.
It is. And you have a child with a disability like ADHD. It can become very complicated when you're depending on the school to understand that disability, and they may not.
Yeah.
And like you just pointed out about learning issues, and I was going to bring that out as well. I mean, you can certainly have behavioral issues in a child with ADHD, but remember too, some of those behaviors can come from those self-esteem issues and frustrations around academic success. So that is something to be very well aware of. If you're a parent of a child who's starting to show those signs, maybe has had some mild ADHD, maybe hasn't really had issues in school, maybe becomes a student in middle school and is starting to have some more acting out behaviors, maybe there's some issues around learning and executive functioning issues that's creating more frustration in that child. And that's some of the reason you're seeing some of the behavior. So then it goes back to, has that child been evaluated? And should that child be evaluated too? So it just like you said, it becomes a very complicated issue. And like I was talking about my client, who I think that's part of the problem. And also, middle school is notorious for having bullying issues. And if those things aren't taken care of as well, again, you have a child who is bright. Our kids with ADHD are very bright, but struggling for many reasons, and now not fitting in with his peers. So why wouldn't he have bullying? Why wouldn't he have behavioral issues? So
I
it
heard a
really
stat.
takes someone to peel back that banana and really take a look at everything.
This stat recently heard that 80% of kids in school are being bullied in some capacity. So
Isn't that
it's
terrible?
to everybody. It's just basically every child has had some form, some worse than others, of something being said to them, something being done to them. It's horrible. It really is. And I was bullied myself. Totally different time. Didn't have to deal with social media and all of that.
Exactly.
And it made a mark on me without a doubt. And it went on for years because I was the fat kid. So it wasn't a good thing. And I can't even believe if it, trickled down to now social media where you have to deal with that and seeing things posted on Snap and also on TikTok. If you're frustrated with the way, and we talked about this briefly before, with the way the school district is handling the situation, what's your recourse?
Well, again, I think that if you see these behaviors, it kind of depends on what's going on, whether or
Yeah,
not your child has a 504 and you want to look at the accommodations that are in place and they're perhaps not helping and you need some other accommodations for that. Or you want to just get him tested because he hasn't been tested for a learning issue or some of the issues that do impact kids with ADHD. Or requesting, like I had said, a functional behavioral assessment to figure out, because you can have an IEP with goals for behavior. This doesn't have to be just academic. So if you see this and you have, again, really important that you're collecting the data as a parent as well. So what the school is saying, what you're seeing at home, all of that, you're collecting that data, then there's a reason for an FBA. There is a reason for a behavior plan. And you may or may not have an IEP at that point for that child, but maybe it's time for that for the reasons of behavior.
Can we do this now? We've thrown out lots of different 504s, all these different acronyms. Would it be possible, even at this point, Karen, to just drill down what they mean and their purpose? Because maybe parents get a little confused about what they should be asking for, or they hear it being mentioned and not sure exactly what it is. Can we even do that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a 504 is general education. That is not special education. 504 is part of the Rehab Act of 1973. And it is laying leveling the playing field for those with mental disabilities as well as physical. This is both. So those accommodations are that does not teach you a different way of learning. It just supports the information that you're expected to learn in a way that you can learn it, right? So if you have a child, and this depends on the disability, obviously.
Sure.
But if you have a 504, your accommodations and very general accommodations, and I hate when schools make them general, they should be specific. But in speaking now, I can tell you that some of the general ones are preferential seating. Maybe you want a kid sitting near the teacher's desk. Maybe you want to do homework that's not as much, maybe a limited amount to prove there's an understanding, but there's not as much because it impacts how they organize themselves and how they focus and all of that.
Or maybe more time to do the
And
homework.
time is an issue. Sometimes I don't agree with time because time can create problems as well. If you have too much time, uh, sometimes kids just like use up all that time. And it's just like more frustration and more non-focused behaviors. And then they're building up the other homework that they got to do.
Right.
So 504 is just like that. And I've said in a previous podcast, it's just something that if you have the 504 in place and you can request that, you need to find out who the coordinator is for that 504 in school. Many times it's a guidance counselor.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a vice principal, whoever it is. And then, it's data that you've gathered from teachers and yourself, and a 504 can be put in place. Communication with the school down the road, you determine whether or not they're working. You need to change them. The IEP comes into play if this is working and you're making sure it's being followed, because remember, there are people who think that 504s are optional and they're not. So make sure that if you have a child with one teacher or multiple teachers, they all know that this child has a 504. So if you see that this is not working, then I think the next step in realizing that a child with ADHD has 40 to 50% chance of having some kind of a learning disability. And if it's not working, perhaps maybe that is what's going on right now with that child. Then you, in writing, request to the special ed child study team a psychoeducational evaluation. And again, they are mandated to assess for a suspected disability, everything that's happening with that child. And I think if you have the data from what I've seen, I mean, certainly there must be times where schools say no. And then that's a whole other journey to make a decision about how you're going to go with that. But generally, I think if you have the data, your child will be evaluated. Yes.
Why does it seem that, these evaluations are so protected within the school? Like, you got to go through a panel and talk and all this, and then get denied potentially for just an educational evaluation. There's a reason it's being asked for. The child is having some challenges. What's the big deal? Does it cost them money? Don't they internally offer it? Yeah.
Everything's time and money, right? So, I mean, if you have a psychologist on staff, I mean, that's who's going to be doing the evaluation. That's just time, I guess. But I think the other reason too, and I'm not saying everyone is like this, but I do say, and I do see that there are so many who don't understand ADHD. And I really do think a lot of times it is not taken seriously at all. Your child has ADHD, he'll be fine. We don't want to do on any of that. And it can be an uphill battle with some schools to address those issues. Some schools are great. Some teachers are great. There's like in any type of profession, we're going to have good and bad. But I'm just saying, I think ADHD and the fact that it is an invisible medical diagnosis and not accepted by many, believe that, you have ADHD and nothing else, you're fine, get over it, start getting organized. And our kids don't have those abilities all the time to make it happen. They deserve tools to make that happen. So I think that, if I can just speak briefly, like if you get a refusal, then I think that, you certainly have options as far as filing with the civil rights department and the government. But, maybe you just monitor it a little bit more, modify the accommodations, continue to gather data, all of those kinds of things. And go from there and see if things change.
Yeah, 100%. And it just more and more I hear about this, and this is, because we've talked and shared that with others, that schools are so careful about giving these evaluations. I know somebody else who is a teacher, and she suspects her son has its potential ADHD, hyperactivity, some learning challenges from time to time. She's actually going to not use the school because she doesn't want her son taken out of class to do the test, and is going to pay for it. It's going to go through insurance or some copay or whatever, just to make sure it's done and done properly. I think it was what was the other acronym after the 504? I just want to go back to that. So it's
FBA?
Clear. No, the other one, IDP, ID starts with an I.
IEP.
IEP, thank you.
And that's what you would be getting if you had shown eligibility after a psychoeducational evaluation.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, and that is
That's an
what?
individual education plan, and that is special ed. And again, an IEP could be for behavior. It could be for functional issues that fall under ADHD. It can be academic, all sorts of things. Because remember, a kid with ADHD also has many times executive functioning deficits, and that's all organizational kinds of things that impact this kid. And that's the invisible part of it, right? You have a kid who's very bright, yet faltering, and it's hard to understand why. And this is why.
Where do we go from there? We're talking about the school district and advocating for that. In terms of the testing, if you suspect your child has ADHD, what are the first starts? Where do you go from there?
So if your child does not have a diagnosis,
Yeah.
so I think for someone who has concerns about maybe things that have been said to them by the school, I think that the first step is probably to go to your pediatrician. I think the first step, sometimes there are other things that can mock ADHD. So it's always a good thing to make sure you've had a complete physical by the pediatrician. Now, after that, there are times that parents go with these Connor scales. Is one of the scales that show the kind of behavior that's going on in the school. And you can do those scales. The teachers can fill them out. If this child is old enough, the child can fill it out and the parent fills it out. As a result of the kinds of behaviors seen, sometimes pediatricians will recommend medication, but sometimes it's not really in their lane to do that. And so I would recommend that if you can get a referral from a pediatrician after the physical to a developmental pediatrician, a neurologist, somebody who's had experience with diagnosing ADHD would be the way to go. I would suggest.
I personally have dealt with a pediatrician and medication, not ADHD. And I would be very careful because
Yes.
they're not psychologists, and lots of wonderful doctors. But I came into a situation where my son was being bullied and needed an antidepressant for a period of time, and the pediatrician he prescribed, but it came up to a point where he turned around and he actually said, "It's out of my wheelhouse now, so I can't help you anymore." And I'm almost thinking, why did it even start there? Like,
yeah, I agree.
Because you think it's the right thing to do until, and he clearly admitted, there's only so much I can do. My son, since, is fine, all worked out great. Just a challenging time, even just before COVID. But yeah, literally the pediatrician said, "I'm tapping out," and that's it. Kind of walked away from it. So had to find a doctor that can understand and prescribe properly.
Yeah, and I think that it's certainly nothing on the parents, because I think sometimes parents, and I have heard this, feel stressed, and they've been told by the school that your child needs to be on medication, and that is not in their wheelhouse either, and that is not their business. But
Yes.
they feel so stressed that they feel like the only thing they can do is run to the pediatrician and please put my kid on meds. The school is saying X, Y, and Z. That is not a good thing at all. And
No.
anyway, even if your child is some child who does well on medication, it is not going to wipe out some of the frustrations and struggles that child has. It is not a fix all at all. Some
Absolutely.
kids, but there's a great majority. There's lots and lots of kids on meds that do very well. I mean, I have 4 kids all with ADHD and 2 only officially diagnosed. And of the 2 officially diagnosed, my one daughter, who's a lawyer, I mean, she has to be on meds to function. She just has to be. The other one, who's been very impacted, is now in pilot school. And I don't know how he's managing this, but he's learned himself how to deal with his issues. He is not on meds, and
Wow.
he is doing incredible. So I say that to point out how individual ADHD really is. Don't ever think that, oh, my kid has ADHD, that means he's this, that, and the other thing. It is that child and how that child's impacted, how that child learns tools to succeed in overcoming the weaknesses that they have.
Everybody is different. Every child is different. Every
Exactly.
situation is different. And I'm big on no meds unless you absolutely need them, because many times, especially antidepressants, all it is masking the challenge.
Well, you do
Helping.
have to be careful with that. Yeah, like in that case too, you would want to have maybe a medication would be important for a period of time, but you would also
Right.
want to have counseling and therapy as well. Like, because
100%.
that's changing the whole Band-Aid issue, and talking through what the issues
Exactly.
really are.
You are just really for so many parents a breath of fresh air and have the answers as an advocate. Uh, it's addadvocate.com, your website.
Yes,
Okay. And
addadvocate.com. Karen at ADD Advocate. If you would like to send me an email, if you have questions, I can help you. And I can give you more information about my masterclass that I'll be launching as well.
there is really not a lot of places that parents can go to get answers, to get help. You can go on blogs, you can go in, different groups, Facebook groups and things like that, but you're not going to get the individualized care that you provide. And it's the same thing that we're talking about when it comes to school districts. A lot of times it's cookie cutter. All right, like we'll give you a test, or we won't give a test, or they don't really understand the situation where you do. So thank you for what you offer. It's pretty
I'm
awesome.
very passionate about this, and
Yeah,
obviously it's not because I read a book, it's because I have lived it.
you've lived
And
it.
I know what parents are facing, and I know what they need. And I know these kids are beautiful, intuitive, sensitive, bright kids, and they just need tools sometimes, just like many of us do. But with the ADHD diagnosis, it can be tough sometimes unless they have that, and they can soar. They can be fine.
And it's amazing in 2023 that we're not farther down the path when it comes to ADHD and our
No,
kids.
it makes me sad. I think we've
Yeah.
probably come a long ways, but I think we
Yeah.
have a way to go.
Yep.
Yeah. And that means that parents have to have the knowledge to be good advocates and make things happen. And that's where things will get better.
Well, that's where you help, because we don't know. As parents, we only know so much, or what the school tells us, which might not be the right thing. Karen, always great talking with you. addadvocate.com, and look forward next time we get together.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.